Well, guys, here we are again on another wonderful journey on the 99 3000 GT. As you can see, my gauges are actually working now. I got the tachometer working. Ended up, somebody suggested replacing the capacitors, so I replaced all of them. I think there was 4 different sizes and 5 total that I replaced in both the tachometer and the speedometer, and now they're both working, which is wonderful. As you can see, I got 431 miles that I've got on this supercharger project now, and I'm about out of gas, I know, but I got this pesky anti-lock brake light on. I did the ABS delete on this, and then I got to reading on the forums, and everybody kept talking about jumping wires, and couldn't find what wires to jump. You know, every time you read a thread, it takes you on a wild goose chase, and then before you know it, somebody's, you know, making fun of somebody else or yelling at them because they didn't use the search function, and then you never find the answer. But one guy did suggest taking the ABS computer out, which is right inside of there, which I did. I still have a light. I think I finally found the drawing that has the pins I need to jump, but at this point it's probably easier just to take the gauges out and take the stinking light bulb out and call it a day. But anyways, the reason we're doing this video today is I'm replacing the throttle body, and I'm fixing a major air leak that I got going on, which I'm going to get to in just a second. But first I wanted to showcase how nice and smooth that idle is. So this car idles really well, but the problem is I deleted the idle air control circuit on the throttle body, and it idles great, but sometimes, and I'll see if I can get it to do it, sometimes if you blip the throttle or let off the throttle too fast, it just dies on you. So let's see if that happens now. Yep, and just like that, it did it right on time. And then usually once it does it, it's kind of hard to start. But I've let this thing warm up a little bit, so see, now it's showing its true colors. There, she's holding steady. So let's get out of the car and I'll show you what I got going on. So as you guys know, this is not a turbo car, it's a supercharged car. So the throttle body is a draw through. So it's pulling air through the throttle body, not blowing air through it like it would on a turbo car. And I got the throttle body mounted directly to the back of the supercharger. So I'm gonna show you guys, or let you listen to a little bit of whine. Don't mind my zip tie on my plug right here. I gotta order another plug, but today's video, we're gonna take that throttle body out, replace it with a 70 millimeter throttle body off of an Evo to get some more draw through. I've been data logging it, and on Evo Scan, the most, the 2-byte airflow, the highest I can get is about 1310 on the 2-byte airflow. So hopefully, going with a bigger throttle body, I can pull some more air through it. I'm still only hitting about 3, almost 4 PSI. I'm not so worried about the PSI. I'm more worried about total airflow, because I did port the heads on this, and I ported the intake. On the heads, I ported the intake side and the exhaust side, so they have a lot more, they can flow a lot more air. So the 3 PSI, that's probably why that number is low, just because these things can move, the heads can move so much more air. That and my plenum. My plenum right here is pretty small, so it doesn't hold as much air volume. So when I'm wide open throttle, it's pulling about as much air as that supercharger's making up. So hopefully going with a larger throttle body, I can get some more airflow through there. But let me blip this a couple times, let you hear some whining, and then we're going to tear it apart. there she died. So what I purchased is this 70 millimeter throttle body. This is a Chinese throttle body. I think I paid about $100 or so for it. A lot of guys said that these had the potential to leak out the seals. I'm not too worried about that because, as I mentioned, this is going to be pulling air in. It's not going to be blowing air through it, so this thing won't see any pressure. You know, my intake is so short that when this thing's wide open throttle pulling air through it, it's not going to be probably much of a vacuum on this side. When the car's normally running, I'm at idle negative 22 mercury. When I'm driving, it's about negative 10. But again, all of that is after the supercharger. So I purchased the one that has the idle air control bottom section on this, and I'm hoping that that is what's going to solve my the car dying when I'm coming off throttle. Normally in the morning time, once I'm up and running, everything is great and it'll idle fine at stop, but then when you start it on a nice hot humid day like today, it's got the issue. So I got the new and improved idle air control that will go down inside of here. But the thing I need to work out is the throttle positioning sensor that fits this is a 3-pin. And so it's missing the pin for the idle switch that our factory cars have. I don't know. I've been doing some research on it. Most likely when I put this thing in, I won't be able to run the idle air control valve, because I believe from what I've been trying to piece together is it sends a signal to the ECU off of that idle switch, and that's what tells it to activate the IAC, because this thing only runs when the car is in idle position. So I got to figure that piece out. I don't know if I need to buy another one of these and then a factory one and then try to tear them apart and make a 4-pin out of it, because the backside of this guy, you know, has to fit that, and our stock one does not fit that. So we'll get to that later. Most likely, like I said, I'll have to run this without the IAC, kind of like I am now, and then figure something out later. But I'm not gonna let that hold me up today, because I got time to work on this. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take all of this off, the intake, the throttle body, and then I'll bring you guys back, because this is pretty straightforward stuff, and then I'll show you how I'm going to make the hole bigger in the backside of the supercharger without taking it out of the car, and then fix my air leak, which is happening all along here. Better yet, let me stick my pressure tester in here, and then I'll blow some good bubbles out of here, and then you guys can see what I've found, and then I'll take you through how I'm going to fix it. Alright, so I got my pressure set up here that I'm blowing into the supercharger in the intake, and this is what I was going to show you guys. I got some soapy water I'm spraying on here, so I'm making some nice bubbles. And I also found that I have a leak right here that is just really blowing. That's blowing out so fast it's not even making bubbles, but I'll fix that too. But what's going on here is I got this 1/4-inch spacer here that's made out of some kind of thermoplastic, and it's been melting on me. I could check every one of these bolts up here, and they get loose every time I drive because that guy is melting. But we'll get to that later. Right now we're going to focus on tackling this throttle body. We'll come back to this. Alright guys, so this plate here actually came off of a stock manifold. Actually had a plate welded on the back side of the supercharger, and then this is welded directly to it. You can see here, this is the original plate, and then that's the plate on the inside, which is like 1/4-inch aluminum. This is the cheap gasket that came with the other throttle body, I made a much nicer gasket, but you can see I kind of got the bolt holes lined up. How much bigger that hole has to get. Now I got to be very careful, because down here at the bottom I ain't got much margin for error. If I go too low, I may actually go out the bottom of the supercharger. So here's the plan. Is I made this out of 1/4 inch thick stainless steel, and this is 2 3/4 inches, which is the size hole that I need to put in there. So I'm going to bolt this up to here like so, and then pack the supercharger full of rags, put paper towels, everything underneath it, get my vacuum cleaner out, and go to town with this hole saw here. Now the reason I made this is because normally a hole saw would have a drill bit in the middle of it, but I don't have the option to run a drill bit there which would hold this guy straight. So what I'm going to attempt to do is this hole saw would go inside this plate, and this plate would keep it on track to make that hole bigger. Now, is there probably a better way to do this? Yeah, there probably is. Involving taking the supercharger out. Well, better yet, it would be to make that hole that size, the right size, before I ever got this far. But I'm already this far, so, and I'm not taking the supercharger out because that's a whole lot of work within itself. So I'm going to attempt to do this in the car. Wish me luck. Alright, so the first cut went according to plan. Now I have to go through this second layer of 1/4 inch. And it's very, like I said, there's not much of a lip on the other side of here. And I'm worried that I might go through. If not, I'm going to be really close. Probably not the preferred method, but when I get done doing this, if I'm really thin right there, I may just put a little swipe of like some JB Weld or something, just to make sure there's no holes that I can't see from the outside. And I may do a little underneath, but I may not have to. We'll see. But I'm gonna carry on through the next hole. One thing I would recommend to anybody that's cutting aluminum is get you some of this Tap Magic cutting fluid for aluminum. This stuff works wonderful, man, on drilling, hole sawing, tapping holes, because I don't know what it does. It's like water, you know, it's super thin, but it keeps the aluminum from clinging to the tips of the blades. So it keeps you cutting really good. So anyways, let me get through this other layer. And there is the finished product. For the most part, I think it did really well. I mean, you got these little lines here from the hole saw. It didn't come through the bottom. It actually still feels like it's about 1/8 inch thick or so. So I think we're gonna be good there. Line my gasket up. I mean, the gasket's a little bent, but you get the idea. Now the hole is the same size as the gasket, even though it doesn't. There, I think that's pretty straight. So now we have a bigger opening. Before I stick the throttle body on here, I'm going to take these bolts out, drop my intercooler tubing, lift up the upper intake, and then I'm going to pull that spacer out and show you what it looks like. So this right here, guys, is the reason for my big intake leak. So you can see how much of this plastic spacer has bulged into. Here it is. Here's a better view of it. This thing was just melting, and I bought it from a pretty reputable company, and they said this was supposed to be the best one on the market, but the heat was just making the plastic soft, and then it was leaking, and then when you tried to tighten it up, and it just started like even here, the vacuum, probably most likely the vacuum there and there was pulling that inside the intake. So what I have done is I had this one made here out of a 1/4 inch aluminum so that I can get a better gasket seal. Now the whole reason that I even have a spacer in there in the first place was not for heat transfer. It was just for clearance reasons. I'll show you here. So my intake plenum that I made, when it sits down in there, is it was sitting on top of the fuel rail right here on the very back side. So I use that spacer to lift this up to get clearance. But now I'm going to put an aluminum one in there, and hopefully she won't leak again. Get ready to do that now, and then we'll come back and pressure test it after I get my throttle body back on.